In this video, I will be showing you how I use the tarot as a complement to my human design experiment by laying out for you my version of a body graph spread. Let's do it. I'm still not feeling 100%. My voice is still a bit rough and I'm having watery eyes and allergies are just right now. It's mid-April, that's to be expected, but still. I've got my old reliable coffee, which is medium roast pour over with heavy cream, pink salt, and cinnamon. That's my everyday go-to coffee. It just hits the spot pretty much every time. Also, there will be some background noise in the form of my upstairs neighbor's little one. They have a little toddler, and she's really high energy and she likes to run, but that's okay because that's what toddlers do. So there will be some of that background noise probably filtering in this video. So if you hear that, that's what that is. So what is a body graph spread and how does it work? For me, this spread is a direct representation of each of the 9 centers of the body graph in human design. One card for each of the 9 centers. I mentioned in my Only 10 Indie Decks videos that when I do that spread, I tend to like to use these 2 decks right here, which are the Arcana tarot playing cards, both the dark and light. And I like these because in the body graph, most charts, not all, but most have a mix of what are called defined centers and undefined centers. I will insert my body graph somewhere in here just sort of as a visual reference so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So, for example, in my body graph, you will notice that out of the 9 centers, I have 6 colored in. That means that I have 6 out of 9 centers in the body graph defined in my chart. The 3 centers that are white toward the bottom are the centers that I have undefined, or in the case of my solar plexus, completely open. There are no gates activated at all. So what defines a center is a connection by means of a channel from one center to another center. And a channel is formed by the connection of 2 separate what are called gates. So if you have a channel that connects one center to another, then those 2 centers by means of that channel will be defined in human design. If a center has some activated gates, or in my case with my solar plexus, no activated gates, but there's no gate on the other side to make that connection, then that means that that center is undefined in that chart, and I have 3 of those. Okay, if you sort of hone your attention in on the bottom, toward the bottom of the chart, those 3 centers I have that are undefined, that are white. If you start at the bottom middle square, that center is the root center. I have an undefined root, but I do have 2 activated gates. The 60 I've activated twice, and the gate 39. The 60 is on the top, the 39 is on the right side, moving toward the solar plexus. Those are both individual mutative gates as far as circuitry is concerned. I have an undefined root because neither my 39 nor my 60 reach the other side to form a channel. So 2 activated gates in the root, no channel. So undefined root. The square above the root is the sacral center. If that center is colored in red, then that chart is automatically a generator chart. That person will be a manifesting generator or a pure generator if that square is colored in red. Like my son, his is colored in red. He is a manifesting generator. But mine is undefined, and undefined sacrals belong to manifestors, projectors, and reflectors. I am a manifester. I do not have a defined sacral. So I have an undefined root with 2 activated gates and an undefined sacral with 1 activated gate. If you go to the right, the triangle on the right there that's white and undefined, that is the emotional solar plexus. I have no activations in my solar plexus. It is wide open. There's nothing going on there. According to human design, Your open centers, open or undefined, the centers that are white for you, represent the centers in which you have the greatest potential to attain wisdom, because they're open, they're undefined for you. There's no consistent or fixed way in which they operate, as in the case of defined centers. So the potential for wisdom in undefined centers is huge if you follow your strategy and authority. Again, this is all according to the system. You know, this is not for everybody, but I found it to be a really interesting way of looking at myself and looking at energy. Energy is a big fundamental component of what human design is, and I've gotten a lot out of it just by looking at the way energy moves according to this system. So, great wisdom potential in your undefined centers. When I lay out the Bodygraph spread, I like to represent my undefined centers with the light edition, because, you know, essentially the color is not quite white, but almost. So visually for me, this really helps me hone in on the energy of my undefined centers as I see it presented to me in the cards. If we start moving up the Bodygraph a little bit, you'll notice all of those centers that are defined, that are colored in. For those centers, I like to use the dark edition. So really quickly, because I outlined what the undefined centers are, I'll quickly go over what the colored in centers, the defined centers in my chart, which centers they are, and kind of quickly what they represent. So to the left of the sacral, the triangle to the left of the sacral that's colored in brown, this is the splenic center, the spleen. The spleen represents fear. It's where all the fear gates are located. It also is instinctual, and it is primitive and moment-to-moment instinctual awareness. This is my authority. I've already made a video on my authority, so I won't talk about it anymore here. But this is my authority. This is the way my inner authority speaks to me, is by means of my spleen. So brown triangle to the left of the sacral, that's the spleen. If we go to the little red triangle that is sort of above the solar plexus and the sacral, that is the ego, the will, the heart center. They're all used interchangeably. I tend to like to use the heart center, but I do say ego quite often. Will center, I don't say so much. But that is relevant though, because your ego / heart center, it's the source of will power, and it's very, very much rooted in the material. There's a lot of material energy to these gates in the heart center. So I have my heart center defined. It is the only motor I have defined. It's the motor that makes me a manifester. The other 3 centers that are white for me in my chart, those are also motors, but I don't have any of those defined. But in order to be a manifester, you have to have a motor connection to the throat, and I do by means of my heart center, the little red triangle. So that's the heart center. If you take a look at the yellow diamond, in sort of the middle, that is the G center. This is the source of identity and direction, and I have mine defined. If you go above the G center, you will see a brown square. That is the throat center. This is the center for expression and communication, and I do have mine defined. If you go above the throat to the green triangle, inverted triangle, this is the Ajna center. This is the center for processing. It's conceptualization. It's how mental stimuli is processed and filtered. You can kind of think of it as, you know, computer hardware a little bit, just processing what you input in. Like if you do a Google search, you input what you want to look for. The search engine does the processing of the criteria that you have entered. The ajna is kind of like that. It's a processing center, and I do have mine defined. And then last but not least, the center above the ajna is the head center, the little triangle colored in yellow. If the head center is defined, as in my case, then that means your ajna, the green triangle, will automatically be defined, because there's no other center for the head to connect to other than the ajna. So if you have a defined head like I do, your ajna will also automatically be defined. The head center is a center of inspiration, how inspiration is taken in by you. If a chart has a head center defined according to human design, that chart has the ability to inspire others. If the head center is undefined, that means that inspiration can come to that person in a multitude of different ways. Depending on the activations, there would be flavors of that, sort of. But so the defined head sort of gives the inspiration, and the undefined head takes it in a myriad of ways. So in my case, I have the 6124 defined consciously from my head to my ajna. So inspiration comes and filters through me in a very unique and individual way. That's an individual channel. Those channels that are kind of situated in the middle of the body graph, those are individual. That's individual circuitry. So the way inspiration filters through me is very much unique to me, and it has the potential to be what Rock called mutative. So hopefully that didn't take too long. That's just kind of a rundown of what that looks like. And I think it's important to have that visual because that is how the spread will sort of look. It will be kind of in that shape, and with one card representing each of the centers, and depending on definition or not, by a card that is light or dark. And I like using 2 decks as well, because every once in a while you'll get the same card from each deck come up in one of the centers, and that's been really insightful for me, kind of looking at the connection between those 2 centers and what might be happening with that as far as my experiment goes. So that's another reason why I like using 2 decks, is sometimes you get that doubling up of the same card, and it can be very telling. So this spread will have a total of 11 cards, 9 cards for each of the 9 centers. And then the bottom card from each deck, I like to use, and I will use it for different things. Sometimes I will use it for variable representation. The variable is noted by the 4 arrows that you see near the top of the head center. Those arrows can either point to the left or they can point to the right. And as you can see, I have all 4 of my arrows pointing to the right. I am what is called a quad right, 4 arrows pointing to the right. So every once in a while, I'll use the bottom card to represent sort of my design variables and my personality variables. Instead of having the bottom card represent my variable, today I'm going to have it represent my profile. When you get a human design chart run, one of the pieces of data you get with that is your profile. Your profile is a set of 2 numbers that sort of looks like a fraction. And these numbers are derived from the line placements of your personality, sun, earth. That's the first placement, the first number you'll see. And your design, the line of your design, sun, earth, which is the second number you will see. The gates of the body graph are derived from the I Ching. And if you know anything about the I Ching, you know that each of the hexagrams of the I Ching have 6 lines. The profile in human design is derived from the line placements. So in my case, my personality sun is the gate 44. It's a Scorpio gate. And on the particular day and time that I was born, in the year I was born, my personality sun was in the 5th line, was in line 5. So for my profile on my personality side, I am a 5th line. Because of the way the human design wheel turns, there are 12 different combinations of profiles that one could get. And in my case, since I have a 5th line personality, if you have a 5th line personality, then that means your body, your brain body, your design line can either be a 1st line or a 2nd line. You can be a 5-1 or a 5-2. My design sun earth is in line 1. I am a 5-1. That is my profile. When I get to this spread, I'll go over a little bit about what those numbers sort of represent as far as the profile is concerned. So I think that's all the context I'm gonna put out before I lay the spread. I just wanted to give that background in case you're not familiar with how this works but are potentially interested. And I will put some links in the description box of sources that I found helpful and YouTube content creators that I feel are very good. We'll go ahead and get to the spread. I am going to be laying it out on the floor today just because it's a lot of cards. It's 11 cards. So we'll see how that goes as far as my cat and whether or not she'll interfere. I typically don't film on the floor, but we'll see how that goes. So Okay, let's go ahead and lay out the cards. Okay, so we'll see how this is going to work. This is a larger spread, and some of it probably will be out of frame. At least for part of the time, I will do my best to make sure that it's situated. If I need to do some overlapping, I can do that. But I just want to get kind of the basics laid out first. So as you saw in the Bodygraph visual that I gave you, the spread will sort of be laid out like that, sort of in that general shape. I like to lay the cards for my undefined centers out first, just to kind of lay that basic shape, because those are toward the bottom and it kind of lays that foundation. So it's a very first line thing. I'll talk about that later. But I like to do that first, and then I will add to that with the dark edition for my design centers. So I'm gonna go ahead and shuffle these. I think my leg is probably gonna be in the shot, or my knee, at least for part of the time. This is a tricky setup, but we'll get it done. And oftentimes I like to just shuffle and pull from the top. I do that in a lot of my readings, but every once in a while I will just shuffle through until one pops out for that particular position, and I feel called to do that right now. So I am going to start with the root center. The root center is kind of a driver center. It's associated with the adrenal glands, and it sort of helps you. It's associated with that get up and go kind of energy. I do not have a defined root, and I have a pretty unhealthy relationship with adrenaline too. I don't particularly like the way adrenaline feels in my body. I get a little bit nauseous. Some people love it, and those people probably have defined roots. My son has a defined root. Okay, root center. That one. I'll make sure this is situated before I start turning cards over. So root is the foundation, so I will go over to now the solar plexus. For me, the solar plexus is wide open. I have no activations there. Very easy to get emotionally overwhelmed. Solar plexus. Wrong spot. So solar plexus, I'm going to angle like so, just because it is one of the triangles on either side. So I have the root, I have the solar plexus. My other undefined center is the sacral, so that will go here. Sacral center. Sacral center. That's the one right there. Okay, so those are representing my undefined centers, my white centers in my Bodygraph. Again, the root, the solar plexus, the sacral. If this doesn't click with you as a concept, but the idea of the Hindu Brahmin chakra system does, this can work. This is very similar. And so maybe you could just try a chakra spread. There are many of them out there, just to see how that works for you. The chakra system is another component to human design. Human design is a wisdom synthesis that involves many components from various traditions. So the I Ching is the big one. It's what the gates are based off of. And the chakra system sort of represents the centers. And astrology is another big one, because that determines what placement you're in. So there's a lot going on here with human design as far as where the information is derived from and how it works. But so maybe just try a chakra spread if you're not feeling this is clicking with you, but you like the idea of maybe looking at energy. A chakra spread might work really well for you. Okay, so now I'm going to use my dark edition to represent my defined centers, of which I have 6. I have more defined centers than undefined centers. Some people have all 9 centers defined. That's pretty unusual, and they're usually a quad split definition. I'm a single definition, which means all of my centers are connected together. Okay. That's going to be the spleen, and I've already seen what that is, but that's okay. I'll flip it over when we get to that point. Okay, so I start with the spleen for the defined center. Now I'm going to go to the ego, or the heart center. The ego is the motor center that makes me a manifester. It's become kind of important to me because I've kind of overlooked it. I feel I've just entered year 4 in my experiment, and I really feel that I haven't done the heart center its due diligence as far as getting the attention it deserves. So the ego is kind of in a random position, sort of like so. So I will just put that there. Next defined center I have is the G center that goes above the sacral here. Okay. And then one card for the throat. Where am I getting? Oh, I have a little space. I probably will have to overlap some of these. Maybe not though. Center above the throat, ajna. Conceptualization center. Processing center. And last but not least, the head center. Inspiration station. Center. Okay, so I'm just going to count to make sure that I haven't missed any, just in this general layout. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so those are the centers of the body graph represented. Now, what I'm going to do is place the remainder of the deck on the appropriate side. So in human design, your personality data is on the right, your design data is on the left. So what I'm going to do is place this deck, the dark edition here, and the light edition here. And the bottom, I will flip both of these over after I look at the centers, and that will represent my profile, my 5 and my 5th line and my 1st line. Okay, my root card is a bit out of frame, but that's okay. Here, we're just gonna start doubling up a little bit. Okay, got those more in frame, I hope. So as I did with laying them out, I will take a look at my undefined centers first, just because oftentimes your undefined centers can be the source of your greatest challenge because they're not consistent for you. So there isn't a consistent, reliable way that the energy of those centers moves through you. And so energetically, they can be a bit of a challenge. And so I like to look at those first and then look at my defined centers after that. So I will start in the same way I laid them out here with the root. So the card I got for the root is the 2 of Swords, or spades, but you have the spade here and the sword here. And I love these cards because playing card pips are about as cut and dry and to the point for the minors as you can get. It's just 2 or how many of whatever suit there is on the card. And if you're a numerologically based reader, sometimes this is really great just to kind of strip it down and get to the essentials. So for me, the 2 of spades or swords in the position of the root is telling me that there is mental activity going on that's affecting my root center. And again, the root is it's kind of the driver center. It helps you with it gives you that push. It gives you that push to get the ball rolling energetically. Your heart center kind of determines whether or not you will actually remain engaged, sort of with whatever that is. The heart center is about the willpower to sustain whatever. And if your heart is in it, even better, but we'll get there. But so for the root, this is telling me I might need to look at how my thinking, like the Two of Swords for me can be, 2 can be a polarizing number, or the number of duality or binary. And for me, this can be thinking about two different things, kind of ping-ponging, going back and forth. And how is that affecting my root center with regard to feeling like I can, have that get up and go and have that energy. And since it's undefined, it's not consistent for me. So I'm going to have to sit with that a little bit longer. Oftentimes these readings for me, and any tarot reading for that matter, sometimes a reading just won't make sense at the start. But later, once I have it in my awareness, it will pop up. Things will pop up just at random times. And I will be like, oh, that's what that means. So something to consider for my root is that there is some ping-ponging of mental activity that is affecting that center for me. Okay, so that's my root. My solar plexus, this one's always fun to look at because this is my wide open center. Page of Swords. Okay, more. I don't read reversals, but it just came out that way. Page of Swords, more mental activity. But this is very specific for me. Page of Swords is my significator for my sun. He has Sun and Mercury in Gemini. He's a very airy kid. And for me, this is sort of his energy. And my sun is emotionally defined. It's his authority. So for me, and if you have an undefined or open center, you take in the energy from around you and you make it bigger. In human design terms, this is called amplifying. So for me, I'm being prompted to look at how are my son's emotions affecting me? He is often as cool as a cucumber, even though he's emotionally defined. And I'm sometimes the one that's a bit of a basket case. And I know that that's because inside emotionally, he's got stuff going on, but it's defined and consistent for him. And so for him, it's individual. He's got the 1222, but he's processing that, but that process is affecting me and I'm taking that in and making it bigger. So how are his emotions and what's going on with him emotionally? How is that affecting me? Okay, that one was very obvious. This is my son, and that's just how that is. Sometimes you just know. So that is something I will be looking at, maybe checking in with him as far as what's going on. That might be just a good prompting to have a conversation with him about his life. And he's much older. He's 17. So it can be sometimes easier to have those conversations and sometimes harder depending on what the context is. But so I will look at that. That's really good, actually. I'm glad that came up. Okay, so now my last undefined center is my sacral center. Sacral center is life force energy. It's generator energy. Excuse me. And I get the 4 of clubs or the 4 of wands. Maybe I have the clubs and the wands right here. 4s for me are about stability and structure or not, if depending on the context. And in 4 of wands, when I see this, I automatically am prompted to think about or consider my routine. 4 of wands is my card of routine, stable action, those things that you do regularly on a consistent basis. 4 of wands for me is my card of routine. So how is my routine, or maybe lack thereof at the moment, affecting my sacral center? And again, my sun is sacral, has his sacral defined. So there is something going on potentially there with regards to my routine that is affecting how I am taking in that life force energy. So this is all very yang energy. For me, swords and wands are the harder or the more the active, the push forward, the yang suits. And the cups and the coins are the softer suits or the more receptive suits or more yin suits. So there is a lot of kind of yang activity going on in my undefined centers. So this might be prompting me just take a look at that and maybe just chill out. And I have some strategies and other things that I use to kind of diffuse that energy if I feel like it's too much. I need to get it out. And I haven't been doing those as regularly. So I think overall, aside from this very specific card representing my son, this is telling me I need to get that excess out of me because it's not serving me at the moment right now. And it might be actually making things more difficult. So, okay. So that's insightful. That's good. Okay. So now we're going to get to the defined centers. So this is the energy that is consistent within me because I have all of these centers defined and I have single definition. All of my centers are connected beginning with my ego. So my ego goes to my spleen goes to my G goes to my throat goes to my ajna goes to my head. So all of my defined centers are connected through a single definition. So my centers all speak to each other quickly, according to human design. That's how that works. And so I often will look at these really in order, in flow, just because that's the way my definition works. So I'm going to start with I think I laid my spleen down first. I don't know why I did that because usually I start here. But I'm going to flip the heart center over because this is where my definition starts. So in my will center, okay, I have a 2, another 2. A 2 of, and it's interesting because I talked about the will center just briefly when I mentioned the root. So 2 of hearts or cups. So we have the heart here and the cup right there. Okay. So the heart center is very material, but it's also about what you love and whether your heart is in it. That's where this center can sometimes be called the heart center. So is your heart in whatever you're doing? The center can also be about love of work or love of just whatever action you're taking. And I have a cups card here. For me, 2s are also about gestation. They're like preparatory. It's preparatory energy for me often. And so this is telling me maybe to take a look at things that I've started to sort of put my heart into and whether or not they should, because I have a few different things kind of in that arena, but is it time for those things to come out of this 2 energy or should they remain there a little bit longer because I still have work to do there? Okay, so that's good. That's clear for me. Okay, now I'm going to go to my spleen because that's how my definition works. Your spleen is your center for instinct. For me, in my case, it's also my authority. It's how my inner authority. It's how my body speaks to me through my spleen. I have a according to human design, I have a very instinctual body-based authority, which I can say throughout the course of my life that is accurate. So my spleen, so center for instinct. It's old, it's primitive, and it's quick. Okay, yeah, that's right. This is the card that I got a peek at. So 10 of hearts or 10 of cups. These cards so pretty. No majors yet, which is unusual because oftentimes when I do this spread, I get majors like right away. And that hasn't happened. And that's interesting. And that's really similar to my year ahead spread too, where I have just all numbered minors and no majors. So numbered minors for me, it's what do I have control over? It's in my immediate environment. Majors are bigger and environmentally focused. It's the big picture, but these are more my day-to-day. What do I have control over? And in the case of the 10 of hearts or cups, in the center representing my spleen, 10s for me, I've talked about this before, 10s for me are about transcending emotion and keeping what works, putting down what doesn't, so you can go into the next cycle. Because you have the 1 that's new, and then you have the infinite possibility of the 0. So the 10 is transitioning you to the next cycle. And the spleen is the center of fear. And so this is really prompting me to ask myself the question, how am I emotionally attaching myself to fear? How is emotion related to fear, and how can I transcend what needs to be transcended? How do I move on? Fear for me, and I have fear motivation, that has to do with variable, and up with like your profile, but I'm not going to go into that right now because that's a little more advanced. But fear is a big part of me. It always has been. I react really strongly when I feel threatened or scared. I'm like one of those jump out of the seat. I'm not so much anymore, but when I was younger, that was very much a thing for me. Fear has been a thing. So there's some fear that needs examined still, and there are some emotional attachments to that need looked at, because 10 is telling me it's time to move to what's next, and let go of that. So, and this can also be people too, like emotional attachments to people and how I'm feeling that on an instinctual level. And maybe I need to let some people go. So ego's done, spleen. So my definition goes from here to here next to my G. Your G center is the center of identity and direction. Kind of, I call it the chariot center. It's sort of like that, where am I going? And it's associated with love too. All of the love gates, there are 4 love gates in human design. All of the love gates are in the G center. So the G center is a really important center, according to human design. So let's see what I've 's for my G. I have a defined G. The moon. Oh. Okay. So here's the first major. So this is making me really take a look. Aren't these pretty? I love them. I don't often say I wish a tarot deck were bigger, but I kind of do for these just because they're so pretty. So the moon for me is the card of mystery and the subconscious, and about what's hidden. You know, there's a reason why it's associated with Pisces. It's very Piscean. There's a bit of a veil there, and it's a major, so it's bigger in theme. So in the case of my G center, the center that's associated with love and direction and the who am I kind of questions, the fact that I have the moon here is sort of prompting me to look at, is there something that I'm experiencing kind of in my environment, sort of outside of myself, that is making me feel like I'm not so clear in that right now. There might be just some feelings of having things hidden from me as far as that is concerned. And it's also maybe telling me to pay attention to my dreams and what they're trying to tell me, because I associate the moon with dreams pretty heavily. Taking a look at those subconscious influences and how they're affecting my perceived sense of who I am and where I'm going. Okay. I like having the numbered minors and the court actually down here, just because that gives me a sense of there's more that I have control over in my undefined centers than I realize. And I feel, for me personally, that's good, because that's stuff I can work with that is in my immediate environment. So I actually kind of like that. So we'll move up. I'm going to go to the side here. Okay. So now we've reached the position of the throat. Throat is the center of expression and communication. Queen of Cups. Okay. So this is the card that I would consider my court significator if I had to pick one. I don't often use it as this, but since this reading is so personal to me and it represents my body graph, and the Queen of Cups being in the position of expression and communication, this is just telling me that I might be in my element with this right now, but maybe I'm not doing it enough. The Queen of Cups is a very receptive energy, very yin. For me, it's like the yin of yin, water of water, very yin, very receptive. The Queen of Cups is just, it's feely energy. But on the shadow side, it can also be needy in a way. So in the position of the throat, how are my emotions influencing the way I'm communicating? And because this is what I would consider my significator, this is just, I get that as kind of auspicious sometimes, depending on where it's at. So I could be in my element, with my communication and my expression, but I should probably keep an eye on how my emotions are coming through in that regard. So, okay. And it's interesting that I get the fact that I have both of these together in the same reading, this being me, this being my son. This is another prompt for me to connect with him more. And I mentioned it in the video I did yesterday. He's getting ready to leave home, and there's emotion with that. And yeah, that's a thing. So that's what that's telling me for the throat. And maybe just don't be afraid to have those conversations. I mentioned down here about talking with him regarding his emotions and not being afraid to talk, to express. And he has a defined throat as well. We both do. And so we have consistent ways that we converse with one another. And so that's just another prompt to me to just talk with my boy. I think that's a good reminder. Okay. So the center above the throat is the ajna, processing and conceptualization of information. And we have the star, another major. Okay, so I've got a major here and a major here. So the star for me, the star is the card after the tower. It's the come down after things have been kind of upended. And it's a little, it's the start kind of that healing process. And it's just, it's replenishing. And this in the center, in my ajna center, this is really telling me I need to quiet my mind down a little bit because there's some external influences that's influencing how I'm conceptualizing and processing information. And and because my head center is defined too, and I have the channel of the thinker, my head, it's nonstop. It never ends. The thinking aspect and consideration of everything. And so this is telling me that I just need to maybe calm down a little bit and in my thoughts, and going outside and being by water, that might help as well. I mentioned yesterday going to the beach and my need to connect with nature. And this is kind of reinforcing that for me, saying that, maybe spending some time at the ocean might help calm the mind down a little bit. So I like that. Okay, last but not least, for the centers, the head center. My head center is defined. Page of Pentacles, or diamonds. This is the first coin card I've gotten, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Got 3 hearts, 2 majors, 1 club, 2 swords. Okay, so for me, the pages are the earth of their suit. They take the energy of the ace and they ground it and begin to give it form. I talked about this in my court cards video. And in the case of coins, of that earthy kind of material, so this is the earth of earth. So this is very slow and stable and grounded. A lot of people say the Knight of Pentacles is kind of that slow and stable, but for me, because I associate the Knights with fire, the Knight of Coins has a little more push for me, because that's the fire of earth. But the earth of earth, so the page for me is just, that is the slower, more deliberate energy. Pages are often associated as well with younger energy, and I work with middle school students, and in the realm of my head center, this could also be telling me that maybe I should be mindful of my presence around my students, because what I say could potentially inspire one of them, or they might even inspire me, and I filter it through my individual circuitry as far as how I take inspiration in. And also just not being afraid to of that beginner mindset. I think a lot of the times that beginner mindset can be scary, just because if you're like me and you don't like being seen as incompetent, that beginner that's a fear of failure, fear of inadequacy. Those are all fear gates. And I have the fear of failure, the gate 32. I have that activated 5 times in my Bodygraph. That's a thing. It's always been a thing for me. That's a theme that's always been. But so just as far as being inspired, just having that beginner mindset. Don't be afraid to have the beginner mindset. It's really okay. Okay, so those are my centers represented. So now I'm going to flip over this deck and look at the bottom card, and this is going to represent my 5th line aspect of my profile. And I have the King. I have the King of Coins. King of Pentacles. Aren't these just so amazing? I love these cards so much. Okay, so the King of Coins representing my 5th line. Okay, so the 5th line is the conscious line of my personality. The 5th line for me has been, it's a tricky energy to navigate, just because in many ways it's considered to be the exaltation of the gate or of the hexagram, even though there's 6 lines. 6 is about kind of transcendence, sort of how I see the 10s in the tarot. It's the role model line. The 5th line is considered like the pinnacle in human design, the pinnacle of what that hexagram, that gate represents. And so there's a lot of projection on the 5th line from the outside. So the 5th line is often referred to as the heretic or the savior. But if you don't meet expectations, you're the devil. It's kind of like that. So having the King of Coins in my 5th line is just reminding me to, because kings can have that king energy. It's the air of the suit. So for me, it's air of earth. So having that clear and concise and stable energy within kind of that 5th line energy that I put out. It's conscious for me. I'm aware of it. And just having that stable energy, that stable, clear energy. And because this is a court, and for me, it can represent people or behavior, this could also mean that somebody in this energy might be potentially projecting upon me. And whether or not they see me favorably, who knows? But that could be a thing too. So that's just something to keep in mind for my 5th line. The light edition, bottom of the deck, I'll flip this over. This represents my 1st line, brain body system. 10 of Wands. Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. So the 1st line, obviously it's 1, it comes first. The 1st line is about foundations and security. And I have a 1st line, brain body. It's unconscious. As I've studied human design, I've become more aware of it, but it's very it's regularly not making its presence known to me, but it manifests in my body. My brain and body will always have a need to feel secure and have that stable foundation. And there's a fear there, again, going back to the fear that if you're 1st line, if you don't have that foundation, you can't move forward because you don't have the skeleton of what you need. You'll feel confident if you have those pieces in place, but if you don't, then there's always going to be an element of anxiety and fear. My son has his personality line is line 1. He's a 1/4. So he has this in his awareness, and I've seen that come out in him since forever, pretty much. But having that, there's an investigative quality. So this 5/1 is often called the heretic investigator, and there's a researching aspect. And so having a 10 here, And especially since this is connected to fear, the spleen is connected to fear, and I have tens in both positions. This is saying there's stuff that needs to be let go in order to move on. And so for my first line, brain, body, in this case, the wands being action, there are things I just need to stop doing. Things I need to stop doing. Put them down because it's not going to help me going forward. I can't have that firm foundation that my first line body craves until I put some of those things that aren't working down. Let them go. Okay. That's kind of how that works. Again, as I said, if this doesn't resonate with you as a concept, then maybe a chakra spread might. Again, one card for each of the centers, and then today I did the bottom of the deck for each of my profile lines, my 5 and my 1. As I said, I will provide links in the description box to some various sources that maybe you might find helpful if you're interested in having your chart run or exploring human design a bit further. So I think that's it for this one. So until my next video, take care and be well.